I recently found this really beautiful late 1940s, early 50s shirt dress in my friend's shop, Hawk and Dove Vintage in the old town of Hastings. And it was a wounded bird, and I knew that I needed to bring it home and give it some TLC. I've popped on the dress for you. Sorry for extreme close-up. So if I have this undone, I can do up the zip, and if I do this up, I cannot do up the zip. The waistline is actually sitting really high, and I'm going to lower that as much as I can. What I think I'm going to do is create panels using the excess in the side seams, because there's a lot of fabric there. There's not so much fabric in this top bit, but in the skirt portion there is. So I'm just gonna create some panels for either side and just increase, just on the front. I'm just gonna add a panel on the front, not on the back, and just make it just a little bit wider and lower the hem a bit. And that's the plan. So I'm going to undo the whole dress, most of the dress, and just piece it back together with these extra panels and lowered. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I've put the dress onto Mildred, inside out, so that we can have a look at how this dress is constructed and why vintage dresses on the whole are often quite straightforward to resize. Over time the threads disintegrate, so when I'm repairing vintage dresses I generally go back over these seams. We've got the grown on sleeve, which is a very flattering look, the metal zip here, which I'm hoping it actually works. A bit of seam allowance here, a bit of wiggle room there, but in the skirt section below the waistband, which has also got quite a bit of fabric, but the top of this seam allowance on the waistline is much wider, and then we've got a bit there, but there's enough to make that just a little bit longer, because it is a little short on my body because of boobage, and I can make this wider. And even there is so much fabric in both the side seams that I should be able to construct some kind of wider seam allowance down both sides so that I can take the dress out a little bit. And the other thing is that the hem is very deep on this, and actually it's just a little bit of an unflattering length on me, so I'm going to take the hem down and lengthen it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lengthen the bodice slightly, go over all the seams on the bodice, and then resize at these side seams, and then make it a longer dress. And that's the plan. When repairing any vintage piece, you always have to accept that the first thing is going to be an absolute ton of unpicking. Your unpicker will become your best friend, and it's very tempting to rough handle your vintage when you're unpicking, but you really do need to take it slowly, stitch by stitch, seam by seam, patiently. It's quite therapeutic really once you get into it. I probably spent about 3 hours unpicking the dress, And I was so pleased to find that the zip, which is a really lovely metal vintage zip, actually still worked. Here's the dress all undone. I've left it stitched front and back whole, but I've undone these side seams, and as I've gone I've made the effort to get all the little bits of old thread out, but I'll need to go over it again. There's quite a bit of room. This is the original sewing line for the waistline, so there's quite a bit of room there. And the zip was sewn here, so there's also quite a bit of room there. Instead of measuring with a tape measure when I had the dress on, which would have been really sensible, I used my finger width. So I need to add in however long my finger is around the sort of bust region, really. Here's the front of the skirt. So we've got cut panels, so some of this lovely textured glazed cotton, and even though there are these stitch lines, I think that you're not really gonna, maybe you can see them here, can we see them? Maybe we're not gonna see them too much or notice them too much because of this sort of stitched detail that is going throughout this cotton. And here's the back. So next thing that I'm going to do is very carefully I'm going to press flat all these seams. That needs to, I haven't undone that bit. Press flat all the seams, use a little bit of steam, pressing cloths, go very, very carefully just to flatten out these old stitch lines. But when you're altering vintage like this, you have to sort of accept that maybe this, where it's been hemmed for so many years, there's quite a lot of fabric in this hem. It may not really press out, and if that sort of thing bothers you, you could always get some kind of trim and cover that if you wanted to. It wouldn't look necessarily really out of place, but I'm going to wait and see, and I'm not entirely sure those sorts of things bother me so much, but we'll see what happens. So pressing next. Once I've carefully steamed the panels of the skirt, I go over the seam lines that I didn't unpick. I'm just using a Gutermann thread here. The original thread would probably have been cotton, and that's why they tend to disintegrate over time. Now that I've pressed the pieces, you can see just about-ish. So this is where the original seam line was, and there's quite a lot of room in there. There's a good 2.5–3 centimetres. And I was originally going to cut down some of the excess fabric off of the skirt seams because there's so much there. But actually on the back there are these two very small tucks. And I think if I just undo those, it's going to give me the amount that I need to be comfortable, do-uppable on my waist and across my bust. That is the hope anyway, because I don't really want to start adding in panels unless I absolutely have to. So I'm going to undo these, and then I'm going to sew the skirt panels onto the front and the back, then sew the right hand side possibly, and then do the left hand side and the zip, and then hem it, and then we're good to go. Once I'd unpicked the tucks on the back bodice and I pinned the skirt panels to the bodice, I found that there was just a bit of an overhang on the front, but the back was more or less perfect fit. I'm ignoring that the stripes don't actually match up. There are some battles that you're just never going to win, especially when it comes to vintage. So now I'm going to sew the skirt and bodice panels together, and I'll just pop it on and double check that it's sitting where I want it to. And you know, what is it with this dress and cats? Graveyard Cat decided to have a little bit of a snooze on it when I was filming, and Loki's absolutely obsessed with it. It must be a really good dress. I wonder if it will have that effect on Keanu Reeves. One can only hope. I re-sewed in the zip using my usual method. I love how these zips have got these little details on them. I wish you could get zips like this now. If you want to see more of my dressmaking and pattern cutting tips and tricks and skills, then head over to my Patreon, where I share all of these with you. There is a link down below to the side, wherever links are these days. The last thing that I am doing is hemming, which I do by machine, and I omit to show you, and just sewing on a little button just under the collar, which had disappeared somewhere in its adventures. I'm hoping that I have amazing adventures in this dress. A final press and the dress is ready to put on. I wandered back up to the churchyard to take some footage of me wearing my repaired and resized vintage dress. It's a lovely fit now, and I'm really glad I made the effort to repair it, show it some TLC, and to get it to fit me. It wasn't long before Graveyard Cat came and photobombed whilst I was recording this, and instead of posing for you and talking about my dress, I got completely engrossed in this lovely little soul who always comes to say hello to me when I come and sit up in the churchyard. He really shows us all how you should pose for photos, and I could really learn something from him. Thank you so much for watching and spending time with me in my sewing room and in the churchyard this week. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that wherever you are in the world, you're keeping safe and well. See you soon, my lovelies. Bye.